If you've got a child who needs help with nutrition, then you absolutely need the real deal. Not a health coach, not a nutritionist. You need a registered dietitian who specializes in pediatric nutrition, and that's what we're talking about today. In this video, I'm going to cover what is a pediatric dietitian and what are the qualifications that makes a person qualified to be called a pediatric dietitian. I'll talk about how a pediatric dietitian differs from a regular dietitian and how those two individuals differ from a nutritionist or a health coach. I'll also talk about what a pediatric dietitian can help you with in terms of nutrition for your children and the dangers of not using a pediatric dietitian, aka what can go wrong when you're not using a qualified expert to help you with childhood nutrition. Hey everybody, I'm Jill Castle. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time, welcome. And if you've been back, that is awesome. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel so you always get my weekly releases. I talk all about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with those ups and downs of raising healthy eaters and healthy children. So today we're talking about the difference between a pediatric dietitian, a regular dietitian, a nutritionist, and a health coach. So for one, I'm a pediatric dietitian, which basically means that in my training a long time ago, I was trained in children and the diseases and conditions of children and how they interact with the nutritional requirements at each stage of development. So when you think about childhood, you're thinking about infancy, toddlerhood, children, and teenagers or adolescents. And believe it or not, nutrition changes dramatically through each of those stages. And so a pediatric dietitian is well aware of all those dynamic changes, what they mean for nutrition, but is also trained in medical conditions that can impact growth and nutrition for your child. Things like gastrointestinal disorders, cardiac disease, cancer, even just food allergies and ADHD and being an athlete when you're young versus older as an adult. A pediatric dietitian is trained in all of these aspects. So how does that differ from a regular dietitian? A regular dietitian is in general, focusing on adults. And what is the difference between adults and children? Well, adults are fully grown, their bodies aren't changing, their organs aren't maturing, they're already matured. So in terms of nutritional needs, sure, they have impressive nutritional needs for maintaining their health, but they don't have nutritional needs for growth and development like children do. So what about a nutritionist or a health coach? So I call myself a nutritionist also. I call myself a pediatric nutritionist or a pediatric dietitian. But if you look across the country, the term nutritionist can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different geographical locations. For me as a registered dietitian / nutritionist, it means that I have completed the qualifications to be certified as trained in this area of expertise. I continually get ongoing educational training throughout my career. Every year I have to have some level of ongoing training so that I'm up to date and am able to and qualified to help children of all kinds of ages and concerns. Now, a nutritionist doesn't necessarily have to complete that ongoing training. In fact, a nutritionist may not even have the formal education that a dietitian would have to go through, which is an undergraduate degree in nutrition, perhaps a master's or a PhD in nutrition. Many dietitians also have to sit for a national exam, kind of like the LSAT for lawyers and the MCAT for medical doctors. We have to sit for an RD exam that is given nationally. And if you pass it, you get to be a registered dietitian. If you don't pass it, you don't get to be a registered dietitian. So a nutritionist doesn't necessarily have to take those exams. A nutritionist could have been trained in college and could have decided not to take those exams and become a dietitian. But a nutritionist could also have gotten training over a weekend course or taken an online course for a few hours a week for a couple of weeks. So it is possible that a nutritionist is not as deeply trained as somebody who is a registered dietitian nutritionist. So I hope that clarifies that. The other area is a health coach. And there are a lot of health coaches out there that help a lot of people eat better, feel better, and overcome some of their challenges, particularly around their weight status. Health coaches are not trained in pediatric nutrition. Oftentimes they have some experience with adults. They may be trying to apply that to children. Those two things don't translate well. So if you have a health coach in your life that's working with you as an adult, good for you. I hope it's all working great. I caution you, though, to be careful of using that health coach if you have a problem with your child, your infant, your toddler, or even your teenager, because the nutritional needs are just so dynamically different. And not only are we wanting to grow and nourish our young developing children, but we are also cultivating their minds about food and nutrition. But we don't want children to grow up thinking food is the enemy and thinking that diets are the answer. That's a lifetime of a roller coaster of, dieting and not feeling good about yourself. We want kids to feel good about themselves. So, in short, a pediatric dietitian nutritionist is a trained individual in the area of pediatric nutrition, has had to sit for an exam, has had to pass that exam, and has to complete ongoing continuing education in order to stay a registered dietitian nutritionist. A nutritionist may be a registered dietitian or may not be. So it's on you to check out those credentials and make sure they're the right credentials for your family and specifically for your child. And last, a health coach, again, probably doesn't have any formalized training in pediatric nutrition, but go ahead and ask. You never know. But again, always, when you're looking for help for your child, look at the credentials and training of the individual who may be set up to help your child, because it does make a difference. So as I mentioned, what could a pediatric dietitian help you with? Well, there's lots of things a pediatric dietitian can help, from just basic education, helping you do sort of the right mix of balanced foods and feeding interactions from day one in infancy, all the way through adolescence. So as I mentioned, nutritional needs change quite a bit. Children are growing and developing, and so you have to kind of have that knowledge about what to expect next in order to be able to do the nutrition and the feeding thing right for your child. But if we get more granular about what a pediatric dietitian can do, if you have a child with food allergies, for example, a pediatric dietitian will help you learn which foods that need to be avoided and figure out the foods that need to be included in the diet so that your child isn't missing out on any of those important nutrients that could be in the foods that they have to avoid. Another example, let's say you have a picky eater, an extremely picky eater even. A pediatric dietitian can not only help you introduce new foods and figure out how to navigate your child's preferences, but a pediatric dietitian can also help you set up a system at home whereby you are helping your child try new foods on a systematic basis and desensitizing your child to any of those sensory sensitivities that a lot of kids with extreme picky eating get. Things like they don't like the texture of food or they don't like the aroma of food. So a pediatric dietitian can help you with that as well. If you have a child with a gastrointestinal concern, such as constipation or inflammatory bowel disease or IBS, a pediatric dietitian can really help you navigate the foods that your child can tolerate and can't tolerate, but also really monitor your child and make sure he or she is getting the nutrients they need for normal growth and development. So what happens or what can happen if you end up hiring an unqualified expert for your child? Well, what I have seen in my experience over the past, oftentimes people who are not trained in pediatric nutrition will run food allergy tests on your child and give you a long list of all these allergens your child has to avoid. Now, mostly with young children who are growing up, we're going to see the top 8 or 9 food allergens come up as true allergies. Everything else, and a true allergy is really having that immune response whereby your child might vomit or have diarrhea, or it might accelerate to hives, itchy hives, or even anaphylactic shock. These are sort of your typical food allergy reactions. But what I'm talking about is perhaps a health coach tells you to go and get a whole panel of food intolerances, and you get a report back that says your child can't eat 50 different foods. Well, I'm going to tell you as a pediatric dietitian, that is really unrealistic for your child, for any child. And this is one of the mistakes that can happen when we seek out advice or interventions from people who are not accustomed to working with children and who are not trained in this area. Another common mistake that I see is that unqualified individuals may put your teen or your child on a calorie-restricted diet to promote weight loss. Well, guess what? As a pediatric dietitian, we don't really do that to children. We don't really put kids on diets because if you look at the scientific literature, they really don't work for the long term. But what we do is add in lifestyle alterations that can make a big difference for families and can make a big difference for your child. So again, a subtle difference, but a red flag if you go to a health professional or a health coach or a nutritionist who says, we're putting your child on a diet, be very cautious about that because dieting children can be very damaged. They can have, not only can diets not work for them, but it can really take a toll on their self-esteem. And so again, these are big mistakes that can happen when you don't go to a qualified pediatric dietitian nutritionist. So last, where can you find a pediatric dietitian? Well, one of my best options that I tell a lot of people about is a website called Health Profs, HealthProfs.com. I'll put that here in a link for you. But healthprofs.com, you can go on there and search by your zip code, and you can search for a pediatric dietitian, and it will populate a list of individuals in your area. Another good place to look for a pediatric dietitian is to go to eatright.org, eatright.org, and also by zip code, put in your zip code and request a pediatric dietitian. That list, it will populate a list where you can find somebody in your area. And then thirdly, or last, another place you can find a pediatric dietitian is your local hospital. So if you live in a major city, a lot of major cities have a children's hospital, and that is a place where you can find a trained pediatric dietitian. And if you can't find a pediatric dietitian in your local hospital, call the nutrition department. You're better off getting a dietitian who's trained in food and nutrition who might not know kids, but that individual might be able to link you to a pediatric dietitian in the area. And remember, you don't have to just see a pediatric dietitian in person. One of the things that COVID taught us is that we can get a lot of our services online now, virtually. So there are a lot of dietitians in your state that might be taking care of pediatric clients, but they're not in your town. So if they're within your state, it's highly likely that they can help you with your child, as long as it's within state guidelines. All right, everybody, I hope you found this video helpful about the difference between a pediatric dietitian, a nutritionist, and a health coach. And I hope I helped clear up some of that. Let me know if you liked this video by giving me a thumbs up and some comments below, and I'll see you next time.